Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you all. So, we're coming back to Furniture Lab. Wanted to go ahead and cover my deck profile for this deck for the season. I picked it up, obviously, last season. Well, I did play it once in the past when the initial wave of support came out, but obviously, like pretty much everybody else, I really started getting into the deck this past season when we, of course, got the two new big support cards, that being the Lady Labrynth, the Silver Castle, and the Big Welcome Labrynth. These two cards alone have boosted this archetype and propelled it from, I'd say, about mid-rogue status where it was before, to a very respectable tier 3, in my opinion, status here. And not only that, but it also dramatically changed the way that Labrynth is played, right? Before, Labrynth was very much one of those decks where you played minimal monsters and, like, you know, often, at least, you know, I guess we have a dozen traps here, but often in old Lab, you'd play, like, half your deck would be trap cards, right? Here, we're a little bit more focused on a lot of the monsters, particularly the pieces of furniture, hence Furniture Lab. We've got the Labrynth Chandragalier and the Labrynth Stovie Torbie. These can both not only set up our Labrynth trap cards directly from our deck, but they also recur themselves when Fiend-type monsters, or sorry, when a monster leaves the field by my normal trap card effect. So, that doesn't have to be your opponent's monster. That's where Big Welcome really comes in, to bounce your own monster. Really, the main thing you want to do is summon a Lady Lab from your deck with Big Lab, bounce it back to your hand. That'll trigger all of your pieces of furniture, and it'll also allow your Lady Lab to special herself by her own effect. The other piece of furniture we're playing is just a couple of copies of Labrynth Cooclock. I was only playing one in my initial build, but decided to throw in a second because this card is actually a lot better than it might seem on paper. Indeed, all the pieces of furniture look like, you know, you might read these and think, like, are these just huge minuses just to, like, set up and activate a trap card on the same turn you set it? And that's the thing about this deck, right? Initially, when you go to activate the furniture effects, yeah, you are going to be minusing yourself. However, once you start resolving your normal trap cards and your furniture pieces all bring themselves back, and you're also removing your opponent's stuff, and your Lady Lab is setting up cards from your deck, and your Lovely Lab is popping cards in your opponent's hand or field, then, you know, it starts to become a lot more advantageous. It's kind of like you have to put in an initial investment as far as advantage goes, but then you get a lot back in return. So, as I mentioned, I did include a second Cooclock. My initial build only had the one. I have also included just two bestial monsters, just Magnapud and Druid Swarm. I decided to take out the PSY-Frame package that I was playing before, 2 Gamma 1 Driver for those 3 cards. The PSY-Frames are definitely good cards, don't get me wrong, and in this deck in particular, it's nice because there is a decent amount of the time we just don't have monsters on the field. However, and this is kind of just a general Master Duel / Best of One thing, not just a specifically PSY-Frame, you know, Gamma and Driver in this deck thing, but I'm not typically a huge fan of them, unless maybe if the deck can support the cards otherwise by playing like E-Telly or Lambda or something, just because I really don't like playing Garnets. This is just a huge thing about me in deck building in Master Duel in particular. I like to have as few Garnets in my deck as possible, so while, of course, PSY-Frame Gear Gamma is an extremely powerful negation tool, just the fact that you have to play the vanilla monster, the driver, is a little bit of an issue for me. So, decided I'd just go ahead and test with some more pieces of disruption here, different kinds. The other change I made to the main deck, and I think somebody actually suggested this in the comments, I don't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure I did not think of this myself. I actually took out one of the extravagances for a single pot of prosperity. So we're playing 2 extrav, 1 prosperity instead of 3 extravagance. And the reason behind that is pretty simple, actually. The idea is that, you know, obviously extravagance can only be activated during the start of the main phase 1, and then you can't draw additional cards later, right? So if you extravagance and then end up drawing an extravagance, well, that feels pretty bad because that extravagance is dead. But I guess the idea is that if you extravagance and then find a pot of prosperity, you can at least also still activate the prosperity that turn. So that's just generally the idea behind that, is, again, not wanting to draw extravagance off extravagance. It's not a huge issue, like, it's not super pressing, but I decided to try it out, you know, just see how I liked it. It hasn't really come up, but still like having it all the same. As far as our trap cards go, we have our kind of regular suite for Lab here. We have the one of Eradicator Epidemic, the Dimensional Barrier, we have the Dogmatika Punishment, and the Ice Dragon's Prison, of course, accompanied by a playset of the Infinite Impermanence here. And finally, I mean, other than that, we just have regular Lab stuff and Disruption. We've got the Maxx, of course, the Ash Blossoms, And then, of course, the Arianna, the Labrynth Servant. Normally, I actually break through my deck list card by card, but I've kind of done that already here, just talking about the deck. I think the only card I haven't mentioned by name yet is Labrynth Labyrinth, which, of course, is one of your very few fields, or your only spell, only field spell, one of very few spells, if I can say that right. And this card is pretty good, obviously. It just adds some extra disruption to your Big Welcome trap cards, and then very occasionally you'll be bringing stuff back from your graveyard that will very, very rarely come up. But I don't know about very rarely, but not a lot, but still good to have. So that's pretty much everything I want to mention about the main deck here. As far as the extra deck goes, I looked back. I did at one point have 2 Intes. I guess at some point in the last year or so, I just dismantled one of them. You should have 2 Intes in this extra deck. This actually comes up for me quite a bit when playing this deck, and if I were really seriously going to invest in like laddering with Furniture Lab a lot, I would actually definitely craft a second Intes, because Extravagance, you don't get to choose what cards from the extra deck you banish, and a lot of the time, you know, you want an Intes in your extra deck to send with the Dogmatika Punishment. I think that did actually come up for me once. I don't remember if I kept that game in or not, but there was an instance where I really wanted to Punishment to send the Intes, but I'd already banished my 1 copy. So if you're going to be playing this deck consistently, I would definitely have a second copy of this. It doesn't really matter what I would take out here. It could be one of the Muckrakers, it could be like the Linkuriboh. I mean, we never really go into our extra deck anyway, so that's not really like something I'm super concerned about as far as like, you know, what I'm actually trying to make here. But yeah, as far as stuff to send, definitely would like a second Intes there. But for my purposes, you know, I'm not really laddering with this deck too much, so I'm not super concerned about it. But again, if you are seriously trying to play this deck, craft a second copy. Other than that, we just have a bunch of stuff that we like to send off of the punishment for various reasons. And Intes destroys a card, Garura draws a card. Wind Pegasus, if your opponent destroys a card in your field, can banish an opponent's card. It's a little situation, but it can come up sometimes. The Mereologic Aggregator can negate a monster. And that's pretty much all the main ones there. The rest of the cards in the extra deck are stuff you can theoretically make, but don't really often. Like we have the Bagosska, of course. We have the DDD Wave King Caesar. This is exactly if you have 2 Ariannas, but you could potentially, I guess, some of the Deviser King if you really wanted to. Linkuriboh is here for Cooclock, and then just a bunch of Fiend Link monsters here, as well as the Dark and the Underworld Goddess, which is also a Fiend, so. Okay, yeah, that pretty much covers everything I want to talk about as far as the build itself goes. So now that we have discussed this, let's go ahead and move on to our gameplay. For our first game, we're going to be up against Tearlaments. It seems like a relatively standard build until I noticed there is a very small Exosister package in here, question mark? So that's pretty interesting, if nothing else. I want to show this game off first because this opening hand is like, this is a very, like, I guess kind of by the books, at least from what I can tell, kind of Labrynth opening play, right? So, you know, we start off with a good bit of disruption, not even the form of back row, but the form of Maxx and Ash Blossom. Always love to open these 2 cards here. Going first, there's not really a lot to do on turn 1, especially with a hand like this. I'm just going to set Imperm, activate the Stovie, send the Mudora, and then pass back over to my opponent. Pretty simple, right? We're going to set up the Big Welcome Lab. I usually like setting this one up first because it can, again, special the lady and then bounce the lady back to hand, allowing the lady to special herself, so on and so forth. Now, arguably might have made a bit of a misplay to not use Big Welcome as soon as possible, like during my opponent's draw or standby phase. That's really going to vary situation to situation when you want to use the Big Welcome. Sometimes, though, you do particularly want to use it on, like, you know, the beginning of your opponent's turn, like right during the draw phase. That way, for example, I have this face down Imperm, right? If I had Big Welcome during the draw phase, I could have set up the lady and still have activated the Imperm, you know, before my opponent had a chance, or rather when my opponent would summon their initial monster. But if my opponent had summoned a monster as a first action here, and I wanted to negate the effect, I would have had to have used Imperm here, and then I would have gotten a chance to set a trap card from my deck with the Lady Labyrinth. So looks like they're going to call by banishing Mudora. I mean, that's a pretty dead giveaway right off the bat that they are just going to be on Tearlament there. Because a Fiend monster, because a monster left the field by my normal trap card period, Stovie specials herself, and then Labrynth, the Lady Labyrinth, specials herself via her own effect. So I'm just going to normal Rhino send Havness. Not going to use Imperm just yet. I'm waiting for the kick close. Plus, I get to use Maxx to get a draw off of this summon now. So Rhino Heart and Havness are going to fuse for, of course, the Kit Colossus. Still the Ash Blossom as well. Extravagance is an alright draw. Imperm is going to flip up, we'll negate this Kit Colosse, and as mentioned, because I have the Lady Labyrinth set up on my field, now I get to set a back row for my deck, or I would normally if I had not accidentally right-clicked here. So, it happens. I'm going to activate the Stovie Torbie as my opponent goes to attack the Stovie. In this instance, I think I would have set up the just regular Welcome, as opposed to the Big Welcome, and then from there, you know, obviously would have just waited to see what we draw for turn. Big Welcome, I would have gotten out the lovely Labrynth. That's going to be the first monster, the first big monster that was released. The lovely Lab would have come down, and then from there, it's really just a matter of what we top deck for a turn / off of Extravagance. So, but that's a pretty, like, obviously, you know, our opponent conceded a little bit early, but that's a pretty typical kind of by-the-books Labrynth game, right? Like, we're just initially setting up our welcomes, we're just using our disruption to keep our opponent behind, and incrementally gaining advantage as we tend to do so, like with most control decks. So, there's our first duel. Let's go straight to the next one here. Okay, this duel is going to be against Blind Second 8-Axis, and if you don't know what deck I'm talking about, you've probably actually encountered this deck at least once. It's a deck that always goes first, even if they win the coin flip, and they've got all the Kaijus, and the Dangers, and the Gizmek Orochi, the big level 8 monsters. So, gonna start by activating the field spell, setting the Big Welcome, and because I already have the Big Welcome set, I'm just gonna use the Dragalier here to set up the regular Welcome. I don't mind at all pitching the lovely Labyrinth to my graveyard, because if I need to bring her back, I do have the Big Welcome. But it's going to actually pass without doing anything. I was actually really scared when they moved to battle phase, because I thought an Evenly was coming down. Well, I don't know about really scared. I think Evenly here would have been annoying, but ultimately fine. But as my opponent goes to the end phase, I'm definitely going to flip up both the Welcome and the Big Welcome. I think I might have actually activated these in the wrong order. No, because here's the thing, right? I could have actually done it in the other order and then bounced the Arianna, but then I wouldn't have gotten the Arianna search. So I think that was kind of one of the main things I was thinking about here. Also, again, I could have used the Big Welcome to bring back the lovely from the grave, but I thought getting out a Lady Labyrinth would be a bit more useful here, just to start setting up more trap cards for my deck. So, opponent is going to... The nice thing about the Maxi during the opponent's draw phase there, too, is that, like, you know, they're always going to have to discard down to 6, so... yeah, I don't really care how much I'm special summoning if it's exactly during my opponent's draw phase. Alright, Extravagance coming down at the top of the main phase here. Gonna find an Imperm and a Welcome Lab. Two pretty good cards. Just gonna flip my Lady to attack mode and smack my opponent around a little bit here. We did not end up banishing the Entis here, so that's good. Still have this Maxi here as well in case I end up needing it. Opponent's gonna move to battle, main 2 end, and then pass yet again. Kind of baffling, honestly. You know, when I was going through my replays, I saw this was a 5-turn duel. I was like, oh, that's supposed to be a nice back and forth, but doesn't really seem like my opponent is doing much of anything here. So again, I guess it's just more typical of like a way to show how, you know, Labyrinth games tend to play out, right? Or ideally like to play out. This is definitely pretty ideal given my opponent's not really doing anything here. As you saw, you know, initially we did have to give up a bit of an advantage. Like, we think we ended turn 1 like 1 card down on advantage. We had the field spell, a couple of back rows, and a Maxi in hand. But as you can see, it's not taken long for us at all to not only have gained all that advantage back, but then have stacked even more on top of it. Yeah, here I'm just going to normal summon Dragalier and just end up moving straight to battle phase. Holy cow. For a 5-turn duel, that was definitely not as engaging as I initially thought it would be. Let's see if we can find a bit more of a engaging duel here. Okay, so this one's going to be a Labrynth mirror match, which is like kind of one of the matchups I am dreading the most to play right now with this deck, because I don't know this deck as well as probably the majority of other Lab players out there, I'd say. I mentioned this on stream recently, not during one of my streams, but during somebody else's stream. I definitely need Evilise to come in and tutor me on Lab, because I don't feel like I know what I'm doing with this deck. My opponent's going to start by activating Duality, followed up by a Shifter. I'm actually going to chain both of my Welcome Labs in response to the Shifter, because I don't want these to go to the banish pile. I would definitely rather these go to the graveyard, because both Welcome Labs definitely have relevant graveyard-based effects. Also going to be able to bring out not only the lovely Lab, but also the Lady Lab here. So, opponent's top 3 cards were actually not that great for them. They revealed off of Duality. It was... where was it? I was not going to show. It was the different Dimension Ground. It was another Dimension... Oh, here it is. Yeah, Dimension Shifter, Ground, and Lovely Lab. Definitely not good reveals, because Lovely Lab you don't want in hand. I mean, with Big Welcome you can summon it from hand, but you really want your Lovely Lab in deck to pull off a regular Welcome. And then the Shifter and Ground are obviously not going to be useful at all, because my opponent already just activated Shifter, so cards are already getting banished. Plus, you know, this deck, I mean, ideally I don't want my cards to get banished, but if they do, like, I'm not really worried about it. I mean, obviously our opponent is on the same deck and playing these banished cards, so that should be an indication that, you know, not like the best way to counter this deck, but it does still shut off a few minor graveyard-based effects. Opponent is going to battle over the set Dragalier. Debatable, I don't think I really need to set that Dragalier, but also because it was the last card left in my hand, I was like, I might end up needing a chump blocker, so whatever, I'll just set it. Gonna fire off the Punishment here, mostly to just set up the Eradicator from my deck. Funnily enough, I did actually have the Entis, but alas, because it got banished, it did not activate. I'm going to flip my Lady to attack mode. Opponent's going to activate the Big Welcome. I'm going to chain the Lady Labyrinth, because the Lady Lab does not care which player activated a normal trap card, just as long as one of you did. So I'm going to set up Imperm in the column across from one of these back row cards here. Arianna's effect is going to trigger, drawing them a card. That's totally fine. I don't know why we, or I guess they, got the Lovely Lab and bounced it back to hand. That does seem a bit odd to me, but also really not sure why we activate this different dimension ground, because it doesn't prevent me from using Maxx. As you can see, I just chained it to the different dimension ground. And it'll also allow me to set up yet another trap card for my deck with the Lovely Lab. Here I'm finally going to fire off the Eradicator, by the way. You might have thought to yourself, you know, Lex, you set up that Eradicator like so long ago, you're only just now firing it off. What's up with that? Well, the reason that I wanted to hold off on the Eradicator is I wanted to wait for my opponent to draw for a turn, but also their back rows were alive, so, like, you know, if I'd been able to use it during the end phase when those back rows were set, then I would have flipped it up a lot earlier, but with the back rows being live, I don't want to flip Eradicator and then just have my opponent chain a bunch of the back rows that I'm trying to blow up, so I want to put them in a spot where they're getting more cards in hand for me to hit with the Eradicator, as well as just trying to get a feel of what the back rows were. So, you know, the other thing too is, like, it might seem like resolving this in the mirror match is like an auto win, but it's actually not necessarily. Even if you flip this and call trap cards, it is only going to check what they initially have in field in hand and whatever they draw. However, this deck obviously can search a lot of its trap cards like Arianna and such, and Eradicator won't be able to stop that. So Eradicator is not necessarily an auto win flip card in the mirror match. Like many cards, you do still have to be mindful of when you're playing it, how you're playing it, so on and so forth. Alright, so opponent is going to summon a Magnum Hut and get to search for the Druid Swarm here, but it's not going to do them a whole lot of good, I don't think, because I guess I do have the Lady Lab in the graveyard, so there is that. But I also have the Big Welcome, so if my opponent tries to use Druid Swarm, I can just chain the Big Welcome and bring the Lady Lab. That's why I'm not activating it yet. I will activate it here. Opponent actually did not end up chaining the Druid Swarm, which I thought was a little bit odd. But okay, we'll definitely take that. And then yeah, once the Lady Lab start blowing up cards in their hand, they're conceding there. Fun fact, they actually had an Extravagance they didn't use because they were under Eradicator, and I know they had the field spell in hand as well, so when I actually reset that Eradicator Epidemic, I was actually planning on just flipping it at some point during my opponent's turn and calling spells, so just dropping the lab deck of everything but monsters definitely seems like the way to go there. We do have one more game to check out, so let's go straight into it here. And our final opponent for this duel is going to be on Vernusylph. Not Naturia Vernusylph, not Adamancipator Vernusylph. They are on about as pure of a Vernusylph deck as you can get here. Alright, so this duel, I don't normally do this, but I'm actually going to throw this duel and fast forward a little bit because it is a 10-turn game. So I guess to be fair, most of the turns are like this, right? As you can see, our opponent started off by summoning the Barrier Statue of the Drought. That is a little bit of an issue for this deck, obviously, because even though we're back row based, we do like summoning a lot of monsters. I do have an Imperm here, but I'm not really thinking about firing off from hand this turn. I'm probably just going to set it, yeah, and then just set up a Big Welcome, and then pass back over to the opponent here. Alright, opponent's going to move to their turn, draw, in normal summoning Tackle Crusader. So you might be wondering why did it flip up Imperm and Big Welcome here. When my opponent summoned this Tackle Crusader, I actually assumed they were going to be on Adamantipator. So I was like, okay, maybe I can save this Imperm if need be for like a Gallant Granite. I thought they were going into a Gallant Granite, but nope, they are ultimately not. I'm going to set the Ash Blossom, which was a little bit questionable here, just as a kind of chump blocker, but they did have a 1900 monster exactly. I think this is a Dino Wrestler that can like summon itself or more Dino Wrestlers. It's just an Earth body, I guess is what they're using it for. So, opponent does have an Ash Blossom for the Big Welcome, but I do get the very least get to get back my Labrynth Chandragalier here. At this point, I'm definitely looking a little bit worse because obviously now I know my opponent's not on Adamantipator and they're doing something weird here, but if nothing else, I do get to battle over the Earth Barrier statue. Even after the Dino Wrestler, though, just because of the Tackle Crusader, I was like, this could, I guess, still be Adaman with, like, a really out-there tech, but... So I still had it in my head that, like, they might be overlaying into Gallant Granite, but no, I think when I saw the Vera, I was like, okay, this is pure Vernusylph is what happened. What's happening here, so... I'm going to use a combination of Imperm and the Field Spell here in order to blow up the Barrier statue once again. Opponent's going to try to use a Bagosska to hold off my board here, but, you know, being the control deck here, being the lab deck, I definitely don't mind just playing, you know, the long game. I did misplay a little bit here. I should have activated the Big Welcome before summoning the Arianna. I just wasn't thinking about it, but, you know. It is what it is. Just missing out on a little bit of damage here. It's not like it was going to be lethal or anything. Setting up the Welcome Lab, using the Draglair to set up the Big Welcome. I do think that is better than having the Field Spell, especially in this case where my opponent's already so low on cards, right? So, alright, Big Welcome's coming up. At this point, the duel's almost over, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it back at regular speed. It was just a lot of turns of passing back and forth while the Earth Barrier statue was up. It's, you know, the Earth Barrier statue was never, like, completely stopping me from making any plays whatsoever. It was just, I don't know. I was trying to play around both it and Gallant Granite when I thought I was up against Adamans, but I guess, again, as soon as I realized we're up against regular Vernusylph, it's like, okay, we can just focus all of our disruption against that Earth Barrier statue. And now at this point in the duel, I mean, I just have everything, right? Like, I got both ladies, I got the Lovely, I have the Arianna and the Dragalier. The Lovely is going to blow up the Vera. I know my opponent's last card is the Earth Barrier statue. They're not even going to bother trying to summon it, they're just going to set it here. And yeah, we'll just summon Mudora, battle over it, and then smack into our opponent for lethal. Alright, there we have those games. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video. Now let's go ahead and move to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There, for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack, you'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.